the intro. Like, you do your
All
intro,
right.
but
All right. Well, for everybody on this call, we have been really involved in schools since we were in Mexico, in Tuxtla Gutiérrez, and then in Cambodia, in Romania. We've been involved in 4 schools in Uganda. But as we've been involved in that, I was praying and saying, Lord, there's got to be a better way for education. I'm so dissatisfied with what I'm seeing. And as I prayed, I felt compelled to get a hold of just my friend Ian Green in the UK. And I asked Ian, do you know somebody that's doing something significant in the area of transformational education? And Ian said, I know a guy, I haven't seen him for about 19 years. So I don't know where this is at, but I'll get you his contact and I'll send Tom your contact. So we got each other's email information. And when we got each other's email information, we contacted one another and then we set up a Zoom call. Well, in the midst of when we had the Zoom call, we were both excited just about what was going on and what we were both involved in. And Tom said, we need to set up another time to talk. And I said, yes, let's do that. He said, I'm going away for a vacation for a while with my wife. And I said, where are you going? He said, we're going to this place, Brentwood Bay, to a spa there. And I said, well, that's interesting. That's 3 or 4 minutes away from my home. Because Tom, because I kept on talking about Uganda, he thought I lived in Uganda. And so we were able to connect every morning because Sylvia, when she likes Tom's wife, when she goes on a vacation, she wants to be able to just relax until noon, go to the spa, just take it easy, read. So Tom and I spent each morning just really discussing what they were doing. And I was totally stirred. My spirit was stirred. I've been to the school a couple of times. I've been blessed and overwhelmed. And I can tell you more elements of the story, but I will save that for another time. Tom, if you want to throw anything into that mix, please do share your perspective on that, and then we'll get launched.
Oh, I'll just say it was a divine miracle. I remember a month before getting the email from Ian Green. I was just talking to Sylvia. I mean, we could go anywhere, go to East Coast, go down to, LA, or, it doesn't matter. We were looking like a 4 or 5 day getaway. And then finally we picked, randomly, I wanted to go to Victoria area, Vancouver Island, and Brentwood Bay came up. And lo and behold, 3 minutes from our good friend here with Bruce and Lorraine. And so it was a divine appointment.
It definitely was. And I will say shortly after that, I'll just throw a little bit in there for those of you that may not have heard this story. We invited Tom to Uganda, and he was doing presentations at the university. He was doing presentations with a few different people. And we had a presentation with the First Lady, Janet Museveni, who is the Minister of Education. And so that morning I woke up having dreamt the dreams that she'd been dreaming of. But rather than getting into the details of it, when we went there and Tom made the presentation, the First Lady of Uganda, when she heard Imaginal Education, she said, this is exactly what I've been praying for. And she was so excited to be able to hear it. And we've got significant favor and influence, whether with her or whether with the Ministry of Education, with churches, and with an organization called the Institute for National Transformation. So we're getting wonderful traction there. And this is, Imaginal Education is growing, and there's a greater interest around the world for it. And with that, I'm looking forward to Tom just sharing. He's a wonderful man, and we are really planning on doing a lot together. Yep. So Tom, take it from there.
All right. Thank you so much, Bruce and Lorraine. And I'm just going to open up and start. Tonight, we've been on this journey of transformation for many, many decades. And I won't go into detail about my background, but what I want to share with you is the underlying principles and the underlying methodologies that God has given us. For us to look at transforming education, we needed to have a method by which we could transform education. Today, I'm going to talk about imaginal transformation. Next time when we get together, I want to talk specifically about transforming education. So today is more about the imaginal approach to transformation, and it applies to all 7 spheres of culture, or 7 mountains. And should Bruce want me to return a third time, we'll can have a Q&A, or we can maybe even look at some of the signals that are coming from the future that will help us to plan for transformation. And so a little bit of my background. I've been married now for 46 years, coming up this May. And I'm father of 4 children and 6 grandchildren, a co-founder of Masters Academy and College, Imaginal Education, a nonprofit, and Imaginal Transformation, Inc. And I'll tell you in a moment what that's about. I've written a book. And I've had the privilege over the last 30 years to develop tools, methods, and systems around leadership, imaginal leadership, organizational transformation, et cetera. And a great honor in May 2017, Canada Christian College, I was able to receive an honorary doctorate degree. So that was, it took me 45 years of my life work to qualify. I tell my brother who has a PhD in computer science, he works with us in Imaginal Education. You got your doctorate in 6 years. It took me 45 years. And anyways, a little bit more about who we are. Masters Academy and College. It's a school in Calgary, Alberta, founded in '97. And it's a K-12 school, but more importantly, it's a research development school. And next year we'll be approaching 800 students. We're looking for expansion. We're just overwhelmed with the number of families that want to get into our school. And you'll learn more about it next time I share. We've launched Imaginal Education. Hello. I heard somebody say something there. We've launched Imaginal Education, which is the global arm, if you wish, of disseminating our vision around the world. So we have a local school, we have a global outreach, and we also have Imaginal Transformation Inc. Because we work with companies and we work in the 7 spheres outside, or the 6 outside of education. We also have an organization called Imaginal Transformation Inc. And so these all kind of work together. A little bit of a prophetic journey that we've been on. Probably over the last 25 years, we've had several dozens of prophetic words that the Lord's given primarily to myself, but it represents the team that I'm working with. And so, this was the first one. And, we just launched the school 2 months into the launch. This is a prophetic word given by John Raymer. I've never met him before. He walks off the platform and walks right up to me and says, the Lord's going to give you the spirit of revelation knowledge to unlock learning. And people will come from around the world and they will ask you, how did you do it? And you tell them it was the Lord. Well, it is happening. We are getting people coming from around the world, and particularly with some of the non-Christian groups. It's really interesting how we're able to frame God in the picture of everything that's happening at Masters. So it's a great witness. Ian Green, similar kind of message. Fergie McIntyre at a pastor's camp with several, 700-800 people. Basically, God's going to bring you to the nations of the world. And so, very early on in our journey, we knew that we were to do something that was global. Even though we had nothing really that we had accomplished, we knew that we were to go global. That previous slide, currently we're working in 8 different countries with strategic national partners in each of the 8 countries. May of 2013, I had the privilege of returning to Nigeria. in previous July of 2012, I spoke at a Nigerian transformation conference, and we built up a relationship. So I came back this week of May the 28th, and spoke to a number of different private school organizations as well as public education. But this was the Christian school owners. They came from all across Nigeria, and I shared that afternoon with them. But I remember that afternoon as I was sharing about this concept of becoming imaginal, about seeing the future and creating the future. And I made the comment that Nigeria needs students that are the imaginal leaders that are going to transform the country. And the moment I said that, as clear as I have ever heard God speak to my heart, Tom, you need to write your book. And anyways, it was so strong, and we finished, and I flew home that night. I left Lagos, and as I was flying home, a prophetic voice in our relationship by this prophetess Connie Hall, she had written an email that night. So I did not receive it until I landed the next day in Calgary. But she said, Tom, you need to write a book. And it goes on. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but it's time to write your book. And so I wrote the book, Becoming Imaginal. It took me 3 months, which is a miracle. I'm not a writer. It's been translated in Portuguese, Hungarian, Spanish, and it's being distributed in multiple different countries. And so that was in 2013. I'll skip this because we've already talked about this. Was when we first met Bruce and Lorraine in Brentwood Bay. Well, this wasn't Brentwood Bay, but that's when we met for the first time. And what a great memory and kickoff it was for our relationship and partnership. So I'm going to talk to you about Imaginal leaders, who they are. I'm going to talk about tools and systems and processes for transformation. And so, Imaginal leaders transform their world by creating obsolescence through innovation. And I'm going to explain what that really means. In a secular realm, we know of many people that have been transformation agents, such as Steve Jobs. He founded Apple, as we know, and tremendous influencer in the technology world and generally in the world today. An Imaginal leader is the seer and the creator of the future and is able to see what other people do not see. And I'm not going to go into much detail about Steve Jobs, but he had a unique capacity to see what most people would think was impossible, but he thought would be possible. It was called his reality distortion field. The people that worked with him felt that he doesn't see reality. Somehow he has a distortion about it. Hence, he believes things are possible that maybe others or even themselves did not believe it's possible. But it's a great story about Steve Jobs. But, we talk about the seers of the future. That's what an Imaginal leader is. But if we go back in Scripture, the Old Testament prophets were called the seers, and Bruce is much more adept at teaching about the prophets and the school of the prophets, and that's not what my intent is here. But the notion of prophets is that they would receive revelation from God, and then they would speak it out, and they needed to do so with great accuracy, or lest they should be stoned to death for being a false prophet. When I'm talking about an Imaginal leader as a seer of the future, I'm not talking about this kind of spiritual phenomena. I'm not talking about revelatory prophecy. I'm talking about something different. And this is more akin to the Issachar tribe. And in 1 Chronicles 12:32, it says, the Issachar, the men and women who understood the times and knew what Israel should do. And it goes on. These people had a different bent. It wasn't that they were prophets, but they understood the times. And I'm going to lay out a context of why Imaginal Leaders is a facsimile, if you wish, of the Issachar tribe, or the men and women of Issachar. They understood the times, meaning they were able to discern signals, what was going on in the world and what was coming in the future and what they should do about it. And so this is the biblical comparative, if you wish, to what I call imaginal leadership. And I don't know why I've got a repeat of this slide, but we'll just go through it. So transformation, here's a question I have. What does it mean? What does this word mean in the context of salvation and spiritual formation? Now, all of you, you've been, been part of this series with Bruce, and we understand scripturally what transformation is about. The Bible talks about us becoming new creations. That the old is gone and we become new. And the word actually talks in 1 Corinthians 13 is that we've been delivered, God has delivered us from the power of darkness and has translated us into the kingdom of his dear son. And so the word is translation, and becoming a new creation, being born again, happens the moment you receive Christ. It's instantaneous becoming new. I'm a new creation in Christ. All right. That's not transformation. That's translation. If we look at how the humans work, and and how we think about in our behaviors in our society, there are these structures. Call them the physical structures. Here's an example of a structure that we have very familiar with, at airports or places where a lot of people congregate. You'd have these aisles that have these tapes that help coordinate the flow of people. And so we have these structures to help form and create order. And but also these structures become social structures, and they become mental structures. Here there are no physical barriers, yet the social norm and the mental structure is we need to line up this way. And this introduces me to the whole concept of mental structures and mindsets. And that's what the Bible talks about when it comes to transformation. It says, do not be conformed any longer to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of the mind. And so how does that work? And, you simply just can't say, stop believing something. Okay, you've got a wrong pattern of thinking, so stop believing it. You can't just say, take out a pattern and leave a void. All right. And so the transformation process in the renewing of the mind is that we have to replace faulty patterns or the patterns of the world with patterns that God has. And so it's pushing out patterns of the world and pulling in God's patterns. And so the transformation process is over time. And this chart here is kind of the translation is happens instantaneously, new creation. The transformation takes time. Working out your salvation, it's a process of becoming more like Christ. And so now that we've talked about it from a personal standpoint, but what does it mean in the context of the 7 mountains in culture? It's got to be a little different, because all of the scriptural references that I gave you are dealing with personal salvation. How would we go about transforming education or government or business? And that's why we need to think about it slightly differently. These two approaches, or these two contexts require us to look at different approaches. Let me give you an example of how Christian education typically is viewed. we have, this is a metaphor, a transportation metaphor. We've got a vehicle. It's representative of education as a system. And so what Christian education fundamentally tries to do is say, we need that vehicle to have Christian content. We need a Christian driver in that vehicle, because it's the Christian content, it's the Christian worldview. We've got to dispel secular humanism, and we need to put in a Christian driver or Christian content. The challenge is, what if that vehicle is actually obsolete? And that is the dilemma we have, is simply replacing content and putting in Christian content doesn't actually transform systems. And so let me come back to this two content questions that I raised. Discipleship deals with personal transformation. 7 Mountains, we have to begin to look at system transformation. Education is the system. Business, government, these are systems. These are societal systems that need transformation, and the processes are not the same. They have different strategies, different tools, different systems, and different methods. It would be a travesty to think, and I would dare say that perhaps some ministry think that if we get people saved and we disciple them, automatically that would mean that our society will be transformed, that these people will go and change the societal structures. Unfortunately, it doesn't happen that way. And so we need to be more intentional about how are we going to disciple individuals. At the same time, how are we going to transform education, government, business, religion, media, and all the rest of the mountains. And so this brings us to the notion of transformation. Edward Deming, who is the father of the Japanese quality movement, he made this comment. He says, a system cannot understand itself. The first step is transformation of the individual. The individual transformed will perceive new meaning to his life, to events, and to interactions between people, and will apply their new principles and understanding to every kind of relationship. He will have a basis for judgment of his own decisions and transformation of the organization he belongs to. To my understanding, this man was not necessarily a Christian man, but we have to have a foundation of personal transformation, a foundation of discipleship. And on that foundation of personal transformation, we can begin to look at systemic transformation. Here's a quick little example of something. Jesus feeding the 5,000. We know the story very well. But hidden in this story is this one little nugget. And Bruce and I have talked about this several times. But, the little boy that had 5 loaves and 2 fishes, somebody had to bake those loaves. Somebody had to go and catch those fish. For the miracle to occur, Jesus didn't just speak food into being and all of a sudden manna just came down from heaven, landed on the laps of people. They took human effort and that had formed into these loaves and caught the fish. They took what man had been able to do, or in this case, probably the parents, and God performed a miracle. And that's kind of the bottom line story to what I'm about to share with you, is that there is effort. There are things that we have done. And I'll be sharing that not only today, but next week. Things that we have built, systems, structures, strategies, but none of them can feed the 5,000. None of them can bring transformation from a national perspective unless the Lord blesses. You see, it's the Holy Spirit. It's the blessing of God that takes these things that we have been able to develop And so humbly, that's what I want to share with you today. It's our journey. It's the story of what we have built and what we have discovered. And so back in 1999, I was flying from London to Nairobi. Those that have read my book would have read this, but I had a download from the Lord, and I quickly scribbled this on a notepad. These four, at the time I called them I cubed, I to the power 3 model. Subsequent to that, I've called these the imaginal capacities. And the Lord gave me a download, and basically what I felt that I was given was a model that wanted to unleash the innovation invention capacities within our organization. And so this was kind of the model that it's morphed into. And I'm not going to spend time on this, but the big thing here is that we were on the forefront. I believe what God wanted us to discover is, how do we activate innovation and invention? How do we bring real transformation to societal structures? And I believe that God had given us the ground floor understanding of what that is like. Through improvement, we can manage towards the future. Through innovation, invention, we can create the future. And so we're in the transformation business, and we have developed the tools and systems for that to occur, of how to see, how to learn from, and how to create the future. You probably have heard already the imaginal metaphor. Inside of the caterpillar are imaginal cells. So the word imaginal is a biological term, comes from metamorphosis. And the imaginal cell in the chrysalis actually becomes the butterfly. And so the concept here is imaginal leadership that would be in the caterpillar state of an organization have the ability to see the future butterfly and to create that. And that's what imaginal leaders do. And that's what the imaginal thinking as a process that I believe the Lord has given us as a means by which we can open up the abilities of people to see and create the future. So we have the process for transformation, and we got the people who do the transformation as part of this mix. All right, so there you go. Got to see in less than a minute a caterpillar turning into a butterfly. So I wrote this book, and I believe it was the inspiration of God to write it. And the reason I did so is, particularly in education, I found that there were very few it was very hard to find anybody, any educator, any school leader that actually had a view of the future in terms of education. As a matter of fact, I write about my book, Why Education Reform Has Failed Cataclysmically around the world. And that is because they've tried to improve the existing system. And you cannot improve a system if it's obsolete. You can't improve it into what the future needs, and needs transformation. And so I wrote the book primarily as a leadership book to help those leaders that are going to lead their schools or their organization through transformation. And I've got a video I'm going to show you. This was the very first Imaginal Transformation workshop since I published my book in October of 2013. So this was November in Lagos, Nigeria. We had about 40, 50 school owners and leaders together walking through a 3-day Imaginal workshop. Just take a look.
I want to see the child born in the slum of Ajegunle receiving the education of the child born in Victoria Island. Fulfilling potential, fulfilling destiny, impacting their community, and transforming their nation.
Africa is the home of some of the brightest children on the planet. That's what motivates me, to find the gifted and talented, to bring out the very best in the children of Nigeria, the pupils of Africa.
We need transformation for education. Education is an obsolete, antiquated system that worked fine for the 1940s and 50s, but in today's world of massive change, we need a new system. Transformation requires a vision of something different, and that's what the Imaginal Leaders Transformation Workshop is all about. I fundamentally believe that everyone has the capacity to become an imaginal leader. The word imaginal comes from biology. Within the caterpillar are these special cells. They're called imaginal cells. They have the ability to actually become the butterfly. So the transformation workshop is taking people in education and helping them to become imaginal, those imaginal cells, those people that are going to be transformation agents within their school, within their district, within their country. And for that, we do need imaginal leadership. And that is what the workshop is about. In our day one, we have created a discovery time where they begin to discover what the future could look like. They begin to open themselves up for future possibilities, which previously they were unable to see.
Rooted in traditional. From the first day of the workshop, I realized that we need a system transformation, not improvement.
As we move into day two, we began to define in more clear terms what is that future going to look like. And we begin to look at it from a system standpoint. They begin to see where system pushbacks will come from and constraints and all these things that will begin to occur. And that tension leads them into day three.
I thank God for the training I had here because it has entirely changed my orientation. And I've thought of going back to the school, training the teachers to introduce the profound learning system.
Day three, they enter into the design phase. And what they're designing is their own school transformation plan. We use some powerful tools like the Vision Deployment Matrix to allow them to look at the system at multiple levels. It allows for us to begin to pull elements, structures of that future system into the now. At the end of the third day, the participants have actually created a 3-year transformation plan.
This is what we've been looking for. This is what we've been waiting for. The most interesting part of it is that it gives you a chance to become a creator of the entire story. So you are receiving information at the same time you are reflecting, and then you can move forward and say, oh yes, this is where we want to be.
When we begin to look at people that have made a difference in the world, the history makers, invariably you find a common thread. All of them had a cause, had something to do that was bigger than themselves. An imaginal leader is one that's willing to transform what they have responsibility over. I can transform my classroom as an imaginal teacher. I can transform my school as an imaginal principal. I can transform my state as an imaginal governor. Whatever realm you play in, you can exert imaginal leadership.
All right, so that was the launching of working with educators and becoming imaginal leaders. And the basic process of the imaginal thinking is really kind of summarized in this slide here. Most people in education really want to make it better today by collecting data from the past. And it's all around system improvement. They want to bring efficiency to the caterpillar. And, the caterpillar is ferocious. It consumes so much. And so you try to bring efficiencies, maybe put running shoes on the caterpillar. Unfortunately, it's not cutting it simply because this particular entity really is theoretically obsolete. But we teach people by getting signals from the future how to see the future and the formation of that future butterfly. And the moment we have this separation between the there and the here, this creates, or the spinoff is this creative tension. How is that future going to be achieved? Can we achieve that future? And so we begin to look at, can we pull incrementally pieces of that future into the now? And we begin to think of what is the real problem. I'll say it very succinctly here. Educators, you are using the symptoms of the current system and are saying that the symptoms are the problem, like test scores are too low, no child left behind. They want to raise the test scores. Well, the test scores are simply a symptom of the system. It's not the problem. It's simply that's what the system is producing. And the real problem only can be seen if you have a vision for something different. The real problem is, how do you close the gap between your current reality, the here and the there? There can be no transformation without a compelling vision of the future. And that is the key to this whole imaginal approach of transformation. System improvement simply is going to give you a better obsolete system. And so coming out of these leadership workshops, we look at the real difference between improvement and transformation. Data from the past, vision from the future. Improvement is driven by, we're dissatisfied. We want something better. So we want a better system, so we collect data. Here, the motivation is faith, hope, and love to create something new. And we have incremental improvement and incremental transformation. You end up with a better status quo or more efficient status quo. And on the right-hand side, you end up creating obsolescence through innovation. And so I just introduced a very big term, a big word, and that word is obsolescence. And obsolescence is not a state of being necessarily. And let me explain. If we were in the 1800s and I walked up to this couple in the horse and buggy and I said, this mode of transportation is obsolete. One day, somebody will invent something different and you will no longer be using a horse and buggy. Well, it doesn't make it obsolete simply by saying so. Even if you had a vision for something different, it doesn't matter. The obsolescence is not a theoretical state of being. Obsolescence is actually something different. I remember being at an education conference and I couldn't believe my ears, but the keynote speaker was speaking about education and said, education as we know it in Alberta is obsolete. And first time I've ever heard an educator make such a bold statement publicly. And so I went up to her afterwards and I said, you saying it doesn't make it so. And I invited her to come and visit us at Masters, and she did a week later. And I explained more fully what I meant by that. You see, Blockbuster video no longer exists. It's been rendered obsolete by Netflix and other streaming video services. Blockbuster did not need an improvement to their distribution model. They needed transformation. It was the Netflix of the world that created obsolescence to Blockbuster. And so take a look at, here are some products. None of these are in use today, other than sitting in maybe museums or whatever. Why? Because something better was created and replaced what was there. So obsolescence is not a state of being. Obsolescence is created. There's two things that need to be created for obsolescence. One is a prototype. Prototypes usually sit in museums, like the Velo automobile invented by Carl Benz. But we need prototypes because prototypes are able to show possibilities. So we need one kind of an imaginal leader that is able to see beyond the horse and buggy and say, you know what, I can combine all of these ideas about wheels and cars and motors and and create this prototype. But a second kind of imaginal leader, Henry Ford, was able to find a way to make this ubiquitous, to make it affordable for the masses. Both were required. Creating obsolescence requires a prototype, and it requires a scalable method by which the masses can adopt. And so that's what we've done in education. We have a prototype at Masters. You can come visit the school. You'll see virtually every aspect of our educational model and system working at this prototype. However, prototypes do not transform. People can come and visit Masters, they get inspired, they go home, and they get depressed because they return back to something perhaps less desirable. We have had to create not just a prototype, but the tools and systems by which we can grow and scale the prototype in any country around the world. Incidentally, it involves the same strategy. For instance, in Brazil, we establish a prototype school, which we have. We've actually had our partner build a brand new prototype school in Brazil. And then we have the tools for scaling and multiplying in Brazil. And we're doing the same in Uganda, different parts of the world. So the prototype, even though Masters is kind of the global prototype, every country that we work in, we establish a prototype and a partnership first before we try to take on many, many schools. And in Brazil, for instance, we've been approached by dozens and dozens of schools and government agencies and we're just saying, no, we're going to get a working prototype first to demonstrate in Brazil that this educational system works well there, and any tweaks that we have to make, we'll make. And then we've got the tools for multiplication. And today, I'm not going to spend time on this. I will do that next week in terms of what is this educational revolution that we have developed. So we've developed a complete solution set for the transformation of education. And we spent about $25 million just in R&D costs. This is not anything to do with running the school. This is just the development of our educational model, the training components that we've developed, our educational platform, a digital platform that we use. Without a digital platform, you can't scale it. And all of the imaginal thinking, imaginal organization, transformation, intellectual property, we have developed over the last 25 years. And so this kind of brings me kind of to a timeline here where in May of 2019, you can see Bruce and Lorraine invited many of their friends from around the world had come and visited us for 3 days at Masters. And so we had people from Dubai and Uganda and Nigeria, South Africa, and even Western Canada. And so during just a few days after that, James Megara, Bruce talked about in 2018 that we met with the First Lady, and I sent the First Lady a proposal, but I heard nothing back. And so I talked to James Megara, who was in Calgary at the time. I said, James, what should I do? And James said, send it to me. And so I sent a proposal to James. And about 2 weeks later, I received this letter from the First Lady inviting us to come and to work with this Institute for National Transformation and a new entity called Castle. And so lo and behold, October of that year, which was in 2019, we had the privilege of going to Uganda. In this case, we were working with a group called INT. Professor Vincent was, I guess it started with him in Nigeria. This is the Ugandan chapter, although about 25 of the 100 people that were there were from Nigeria. So we had a good Nigerian contingency. But this was an Imaginal workshop where we were beginning to design out a national think tank called Castle. And so we spent several days working in designing what this think tank could be like. And immediately after the Imaginal workshop was an educational conference, and I was asked to be the keynote speaker. And what kind of message would you give to a country where the average expenditure on education per child is $60 per year? In Canada, it's about $12,000 a year. The population explosion of youth is unprecedented in Africa. So what kind of solution set do you share with the leaders of the country of Uganda? Well, the next 2 days we had this workshop here, and I had the privilege of sharing 2 keynote addresses. The Prime Minister was, and the First Lady were the host of the conference. And so it was my opportunity to share the Imaginal process, the Imaginal thinking process, and that we needed to see what the future would look like. And we needed to invest into those things that would move us to that future, as opposed to trying to improve the existing system. Listen to a snippet from this keynote address in Uganda.
Most people are trying to improve the system by collecting data. Data is from the past. All right, you're collecting data from an obsolete system, and you want to improve the obsolete system with the data from the obsolete system. Think of that. All right? We need to see the future. And if you can see the future, then that creates the tension between the here and the there. For the first time, if you have a creative tension, for the first time you can actually define what is the problem. You see, the problem isn't the current system. The problem is, how do we get to the future system? The problem is all about system transformation. And that's what we have been looking at. How do we take an antiquated, obsolete system and transform it into something that's going to produce all of these effects that I've talked to you about? So transforming education.
All right. So the First Lady made some complimentary comments, which was wonderful. But at that conference, a very significant event took place. And they actually had the official launching of the first national think tank for the country of Uganda, called Castle. This is the Castle stands for Center of Advanced Strategic Leadership, is the acronym behind Castle. And so the Prime Minister, they had this big document there. The Prime Minister signed, the First Lady signed. I had a chance to sign. James Magara, who is the chairman of the Castle Group, signed it. And all of this to make this point is that the transformation of any aspect of the 7 mountains in Uganda required us to establish a structure that would help us to develop those kinds of solutions that needed. In other words, we needed to develop a national think tank or a national transformation center. And so that's part of this whole notion of transformation, is that we need to create new systems and structures. And that's what we launched that week. And I was pleased to hear that, James sent me an update on what they have done during COVID. They have produced almost 20 research papers and white papers and recommendations to the government for transformation since this time, since the launch of this a little over a year ago. They have been working during COVID and have been developing these proposals to the government. I just was blown away by the initiative of these people. We ourselves, we went back in January 20, a couple of our lead trainers went there with Doreen and Cindy, and we trained about 80 educators. Our basic premise is we don't want to transform the country at once. We want to establish a prototype. And so there's about 3 early adopter schools that have volunteered to become prototype schools in Uganda. And so we're going to work with these prototypes. And from there, we will begin to look at how could we scale and transform the country. And during my keynote address, I shared that, the basic strategy is let's build prototypes. This picture, by the way, is a new school that we built in Brazil. We need to build some digital assets. I won't go into detail about this. I'll talk about it a little bit more next week. And these are learning adventures is what we call them. It's more or less the content of the curriculum, but it's all in a digital platform. And then we've got a way by which we could distribute that platform or that content. And then ultimately we can distribute it out to all the schools. And so the basic strategy behind here is hard work up front to establish prototypes and the digital content that we need. And then we leverage exponential growth to bring it to the nation. And so I want to just finish by looking at 7 Mountain Transformation and use Brazil as an example. This is we partnered with a Japanese family. They arrived into Brazil in 1939. So the Nishimura family now has 4 generations in Brazil. George Nishimura on the left is a good friend of mine. At the time when we went there, he was the CEO chair of the Jacto Group in the family business. On the right here is the school that we launched in 2018, a brand new school we built. But let me just kind of unfold this Brazilian story a little bit here. This family owns one of the largest agribusinesses in Brazil. It's actually an international, multinational company. They're arguably the leaders in the world in sprayer technologies. And they have a lot of other companies that they have as well. And so that's the Jacto Group. They also have a huge number of initiatives around education, college level, vocational training. They have a whole campus for education. And on that campus, they built a brand new school. And we were shocked when they unveiled the Innovation Center, and they called it the Rudmik Center. And I'm not here to try to boast about it, but it does speak about or begs the question, why? Why would they even name that after, the Rudmik family here? So that's what I want to share with you, is that in 2015, I approached George and I said, you've invited us to bring an educational revolution to Brazil, and that's what we're doing. However, we believe that we have tools and systems and methods that can transform your company. And so we began to, this just shows you the school development and the launch, et cetera. But this is the company. We have plants around the world, 6 different plants, products in operation. And so we offer them that we come into a joint research project to develop an innovation platform for their company. They invented the multi-harvester machine. So that was invented by the Jackal, Suji Bushimura. And so
Tom, you're going to have to repeat those things because we couldn't hear what you were saying with the video on. So just give a brief overview.
Yeah, all right. Basically, it was just showing, who they are as a company. And the Jackal Group, under the founder of Sunji Nishimura, invented the coffee harvester machine. And that is kind of what catapulted them into the farm equipment business. And that would have been in the late 70s that they invented the coffee harvester machine. And so the Jackal Group had its roots in innovation and invention. But as is the case with most successful companies, the most innovative stage of your growth is in the early stage, when you have the willingness to try something new and invent something. But as they matured, innovation began to get replaced by improvement. The Japanese improvement quality, they became experts at the Toyota method of quality. And the innovation piece faded away. And so we began to, I offered to George that we could start having these Imaginal workshops. And here's a video clip. It's in Portuguese, so I turned off the narration because nobody would understand that. But this is a company video about us working with them, developing this innovation.
Inovação. Você já imaginou como o Grupo Jato estará daqui?
Okay, I turned off the audio. I thought I had turned it off, but essentially, we started to do these workshops, and over the last 5 years, prior to COVID, we have done 10 Imaginal workshops with the company, and several with the family themselves, with just the family. And they've come to Calgary. They've sent business leaders to our school. Can you imagine? Industrial manufacturer leaders coming to our school to learn about profound learning and Imaginal thinking. And that's what this company has done. And so out of this journey, we have developed a method of transformation that can be applied to any of the 7 mountains. It involves a center, which we call Imaginal Center Innovation Platform. So it's a whole method and technology around how innovation can be activated in an organization, people development, and knowledge creation, which fuels the whole process. So, we start with these Imaginal Transformation Centers, and we built one at Masters. A space for human collaboration and for human beings to do unique kind of work that you normally would never do otherwise. This transformation center is a physical environment, inspiring environment, beautiful environment. It's there to help organizations to transform. So there's a whole system around becoming a Imaginal organization. Developing Imaginal leaders, we do that in our center. Solving complex problems. As a matter of fact, we've been approached, one of our partners in Hungary right now has been approached by the government to solve a very difficult community development problem that they have. They have about 300 communities. They want them to solve one of them involving the Roma people, the Gypsy people in Hungary. And so tomorrow I've got a Zoom call where I'm going to share with them how the ITC can be used to develop a transformation plan for those communities. And so we got a whole methodology and system of how we address complex problems and then how to create a funnel for innovation. And, this is kind of what it looks like. Our center, and these happen to be a group from Spain and Brazil. We had quite an interesting time because we had 2 different languages than English, the third language, and it was kind of an interesting workshop that we had. So this is a very specific process of how we orchestrate people through the Imaginal process. And, you know, I won't go into detail here, but this is the digital or the innovation platform that we designed in collaboration with our Brazilian partner. I'm not going to spend time on this. We develop people, you know, using workshops as well as our digital platform, which I'll introduce next week, the whole learning and people development. And the big thing about people development when it comes to business, organization, government, unlike education, learning is not the outcome. Behavioral change is the outcome. You want somebody to learn a new skill so that they can be put into practice something new. It's a behavioral change. Education is the only system where learning itself is the outcome because it's needed at the next level. And it's really an artificial world that is not really replicated elsewhere. There is learning that takes place. You know, executive leaders, they learn new things, but they're not learning so that they get a test to show that they learned something. They're learning so that they can develop competencies so that they can produce a result for the business or wherever else it is. So people development is quite a bit different than just education and learning. And fortunately, we have to do both at Masters because part of our strategy is how do we develop our teachers? And there we're talking about professional practice, competency development. How are they maturing? How do we bring accountability to teacher practice? How do we empower them to identify their own gaps, et cetera, et cetera? So people development is a big part of what we have. And so at the center of this ecosystem is knowledge creation. Again, coming back to this Issachar moment here, where we believe the imaginal thinking process, we are able to see the future because God has given us a wonderful tool called imagination. Imagination is the eye of the human spirit. And when imagination is activated, and the way we do that in the imaginal process is we do it by bringing in signals from the future that are present today. In other words, we have all of these different signals. And from a metaphor standpoint, think of those signals as puzzle pieces. The signals are trends. They're strong signals like trends. Autonomous vehicles. We know that eventually in the near future, more and more vehicles will be driverless, whether it be cars or trucks, other vehicles and transports will be driverless because we would have autonomous technologies that will enable that to occur. We can predict that timeline. That's a signal from the future that's in today. That's a strong signal. There's weak signals from the future that are further out that may not have a high probability of maybe coming into being, but should they come into being, they would have great impact. So by having a process by which we can gather these signals, we can start to put them together. And imaginal thinking is a way by which those signals can be put together and they form a picture of the future. And there is a leader by the name of Larry Christensen. Larry is, Clayton Christensen is a former Harvard Business School professor. He invented the theory of disruptive innovation. He just passed away 3 or 4 months ago. But he invented this notion of disruptive innovation. And how does that come into being? Listen to what he has to say about the future.
data is only available about the past. And when we teach people that they should be data-driven and fact-based and analytical as they look into the future, in many ways we condemn them to take action when the game is over. The only way you can look into the future, there's no data, so you have to have a good theory. And we don't think about it, but every time we're taking an action, it's predicated upon a theory. And so by teaching managers to look through the lens of a theory into the future, you can actually see the future very clearly.
Now,
and I think that's what the theory of disruption has done.
What we have done is we've gone beyond a theory of imaginal thinking. We've actually built a method by which we can actually create future scenarios. I don't have time to go into detail with you today about that, but this is kind of this is part of what we built when we worked with the Jackal group. We developed a process by which we can see and create the future. It's called imaginal thinking. I'm not going to go into detail. What you see on the right-hand side here, these are students in grade 11 that we put them, our students are becoming imaginal leaders. So we teach them how to become the seers and creators of the future. Here they're doing trend analysis. They're looking at S-curve analysis of number of trends. And on the bottom here, they're doing what is called a future will impact analysis. And this is one of many different tools that we have in helping organizations to see the future. Remember, right at the beginning, I said, if there is no compelling vision, there can be no transformation. Because transformation is how to close the gap between the here and the there. And if there is no gap, and if all you have is trying to make it better here, then a vision is not needed. So we needed a process by which we can see the future, and we could do it rather well. By the way, the imaginal thinking process is not about predicting the future. It is complete foolishness to think you can predict the future. What we are trying to do is come up with probable, plausible, possible, preposterous. There's at least 5 different kinds of futures that we can see. So the goal of the Imaginal workshop is to develop multiple futures as opposed to a singular future. Now, in the context of a Christian organization, the whole process is enveloped by people having being led by the Holy Spirit. So this process, just like anything else that we do in this world, when God is in the center of it, it just elevates everything that we're doing. So when we're doing trend analysis, when we're looking at and building scenarios, we're asking God to reveal through the Holy Spirit what are those things that would what that would look like. And we're doing it not so much from a revelatory perspective. We're doing it from a more of a analytical, researching perspective as the people of Issachar. You see, the problem with revelation, and quite frankly, there is no problem with it. Revelation is one of the most significant gifts of the Spirit. And our journey, if you came to Masters, you'll see a 24-foot curved wall, and I've got dozens and dozens of prophetic words and illustrations on that wall. And we recognize and honor the importance of the prophetic. But if you're in an Imaginal workshop and somebody stands up and says, you know, the Lord just told me that this is what it is, what do you do after that? You know, conversation is ended. You know, the Lord just told us something and it's over. And so there is a place for revelation, and there is a place for us to develop under the guidance of the Holy Spirit as the Issachar to understand the times and to know what to do. And so we take people through a process of understanding signals. We can view the future through that. And what appears is these opportunity for innovation. And the innovation opportunities using the imaginal thinking approach is many times larger than using traditional approaches in business. Forget about this slide, all the words on it, way too busy. This is something I sent to the JACCO group a few years ago. They have what is called sustaining innovation. Clayton Christensen called this sustaining innovation, which is how do you meet the customer needs today through improving what you've got? So they spend all their time here, and we are saying, let's create new knowledge. Let's look at the future. Let's look at trends. Let's create scenarios. Let's look at all that, and let's see if we can also come up with disruptive innovation. And I'm suggesting a balance of 70-30 in terms of focus between there. And so this is kind of a summary slide. We develop a partnership in a country with an ITC. Imaginal Transformation Inc. is probably the liaison. Imaginal Education Canada USA relates here. In education, we flow through our solution set here, and we develop prototype schools. We work with education. In the other 6 spheres, we have this ecosystem of solutions. And so we are now able to address all 7 mountains of society. And these are things that we do in all of that. So this is my last slide, and I'm done kind of sharing. It's a very personal story, because everything we have developed was developed in the context of us working with our strategic partners wherever they are, whether it be at Masters or in Brazil or other countries. So did I lose everybody? Oh, no, people are still here. All right. Maybe that was too much information, and if it is, I apologize. But I wanted you to get a sense that if we are going to transform culture, it starts with individual discipleship, but then it goes beyond that. And what is beyond that is what I shared with you today.
Thank you, Tom. That was excellent. For maybe many, there's so much information and it's all new. But I will say, as you continue to understand this in a greater way, it can activate you and cause you to even develop, and it affects every single area of life. Because it's not only, in one sense, the 7 mountains or education, it's all of life that will be affected by being able to develop in this way. And once again, I will say, each time that I've been to the school, I have wept, not only at the capacity of the children and the brilliance that's there. I think in many ways, the joy of learning that I experienced, that watching the children, the joy that they have within the context of the classroom and being there is just off the charts. And so we're going to get more next week as it applies to Imaginal Education of what they're actually doing. And the following week, what we're going to do is share a few things, but I'd really like it if you would write down some questions, send in questions, and that we're going to go through the process of, asking and hopefully answering many questions at the same time.
Competitive.
So, what's that? I heard somebody say something, but I want to thank you for your time. In particular, if you have educators that would be interested in joining us next week, invite them to just come along, because I will say you will be blessed by what they've developed, what they're doing. And it really is an incredible system that has the capacity to transform education globally and really release a greater level of capacity within every single individual, every child. And so, but Tom, I want to thank you. Anybody else that wants to thank Tom, either clap or give him a thumbs up. But so thank you, Tom. Really appreciate your time.
All right.
And
If
go ahead.
it's an hour and a half, so our time is up, but I'd gladly answer any questions if somebody had any quick, like pressing question right now. I'd gladly, take a few minutes.
Questions?
Okay, I had a question about what's happening in USA. Now, we actually don't have a prototype school in the United States, although our Imaginal Education US is founded and situated in Melbourne, Florida. I don't know why the door has never opened. We are currently in talking with a potential prototype school out of Charleston, and we might be launching our first prototype school there. One of the things that we are wanting to do is develop a whole homeschooling approach as well. And we have regular schools, but what we do in our school is quite extraordinary. But we want to take that and share it beyond just established educational systems. And so we're looking at how we can bring that to a homeschool market as well.
Sue, any questions? You are completely involved in homeschooling. Sue is in Florida. And so Sue, any questions or any thoughts in regards to the homeschooling portion?
We're about 3 hours south of Melbourne, which is pretty crazy.
Really?
But 2 hours south of Melbourne, down in Palm Beach County. And I homeschooled for 20 years, 4 children. They're all grown now, professionals. And we also run a 1 day a week program where the kids come in one day, get together, and we have experts that teach them. But 2 years ago, I launched an elementary program based on what I learned and what God had shown me. And that year I ran into Bruce through a mutual friend, and he gave me your book. So as I read that book, so many things God had shown me, I had already put in place for what we were going to do. And that whole summer, I just tweaked things based on what I was learning from your book. And we put it together, and the program is called Adventures. It's K-5. And it's 1 day a week as homeschoolers. They go home during the week and work on reading, writing, arithmetic. But when they're with us, they are, it was funny because they last week built roller coasters out of Connects while they were learning forces and things. And it's all hands-on science. We work with Creation Institute in Fort Lauderdale that does our science. So it's this 1 day event for elementary students. And I've always wondered, how do you take that into the higher grades? Because that's frightening to me. I'm so used to staying, working for those test scores, and that's what has made our kids succeed in the higher education, in their master's programs and in their professional. But I taught my kids this the way you're describing it. And I know that's why they love to learn. They've continued to love to learn, and been successful in that. So this is so exciting for me. And I think it's a God time for us as we're expanding our program even more to connect with you guys. So Thank you very much for sharing today. And I look forward, we actually have some people here that want to do this. And I told them, I'm not building a school, but I'll help you, but I will work with the homeschoolers. So there's a partnership that we're talking to a business, local, they're global business, but technology business that's like, I want you to build me what you're talking about. And I'm thinking, I don't know what I'm talking about. So this is really exciting. I look forward to connecting.
I've got a few questions here in terms of, how long does it take to develop a prototype school? I would say about 3 years to get the entire school fully rolled out. We never advocate, let's say if you've got a school of 40, 50 teachers, at all of them at one time. We advocate taking the early adopters, those that are most ready, and work with them. You don't need to deal with the resistance of a large group. You need to work with the ones that really want to fly. The evidence of profound learning and impact is viewable and experienced almost from day one. We can put teachers in a 2-3 day training seminar. Next day, you can start seeing evidence of what that impact will have. We've seen that in Brazil in particular, where they did a few kind of pilots, 1 or 2 teachers, and the results of that were so astounding that it spurred the rest of the teachers on and saying, well, we would like to see that as well. One of our Monica, what's her last name?
Musanero, Monica Musanero.
Yeah, she took the profound learning model, and she never really was trained fully. I did 3 half-day seminars in Uganda back in 2018. She attended. She absorbed as much as she could. She went to our website, looked at videos. She assimilated all of that herself, went to her own school, which is in a rural, poverty-stricken area of Uganda. And all of a sudden, the changes, the kids were coming to school. Things were happening that she'd never seen before. And so the impact of our educational model is immediate. But to fully engage and roll out as we have in the fullness of it, it's a very comprehensive educational model. And next week, I'll go through it in detail with you. I would say to fully develop a school will be about 3 years. But to look at multiplication in a country, it doesn't mean that every school takes that length of time. The first early adopters, the prototypes need to develop. They need to work against the mindsets and the educational system that they've been ingrained in, and they have to shift the orientation away. So we have built all of the systems for multiplication. It's done. The digital systems are done. There are digital assets that go into the system that are country specific. And I won't go into detail. You can find out next week. And those country specific assets, the sooner we can build them, and if we get governmental support, but I would say within the first 5-year window, we can build out the digital assets and prototypes that would bring us to the level of multiplication. And I would say in a 10-year window, we could be at a critical mass in social systems. To get a tipping point in social systems, you need a 10% adoption. And we could easily hit 10% adoption in a country in 10 years. And that tipping point becomes unstoppable. And that's what we proposed to the Uganda government. Unfortunately, COVID hit. And, we had a training team go there, and the Ministry of Education invited us to come back. And, we were ready to start. And all of a sudden, everything kind of ended because of COVID in terms of travel. However, the Castle Group, they keep working away, an amazing group of Christian leaders there.
I'll identify as you're reading the next question, Tom, that Dr. Monica Musanero, who has 2 schools in an incredibly impoverished area, she brought the concepts to the school, and they identified that there was a problem in the area because all the agriculture was failing. So they did the research to be able to identify what would be alternative crops that they could grow and what they could do for irrigation. And they solved the problems, and the school kids became like heroes in the area because they came up with the solution for a problem the entire community and area was experiencing. I'll get the details for that story and maybe send it out in an email so you can read it. But it was very cool, just of the short little brief time that she had, and they applied it, and the results that they saw in several months was just wonderful.
Yeah, I've got another question about a concrete example of the working with the Jackdaw group. We developed the Imaginal processes as a sub-process within a larger framework of what they're doing in innovation. It wasn't like they did not have an R&D group. They had a very large R&D department. What we did is we brought in a perspective. Remember I showed you that one slide, 70% design thinking using sustainable innovation versus disruptive. So we were in a co-development of a larger innovation initiative. Part of what they're doing is trying to imitate Silicon Valley and how industry is connecting with Stanford University. And so they're building an entire ecosystem of innovation, and we would be one subsystem in a larger system, if you wish, of what they're building. So it's a good question. I would not suggest that the JACTO group is now only using this as their innovation platform. This is a part of a larger landscape that they have built. And again, we were in kind of the final stages of launching the research teams that we needed to put in place for, there's a whole methodology of knowledge creation going from research to analytics to synthesis, and all of that. And we kind of got hit with the COVID travel restrictions as well. But this is for you, Jordash, but I don't know if anyone else needs to hear all this, but the imaginal thinking process may be slightly ahead of where they're at right now. And I've spoken with George Nishimura. They've hired some consultants. Here's the dilemma that we faced. Their second generation of leadership, which was George and my age, in the last 2 years, they transferred leadership of the company business. It's a 70-year-old company. They transferred leadership to the third generation, or the 40-something. And so during that transition time, George and others were not saying, okay, we're going to overlay this. And so there was kind of a lull as they're transitioning new leadership. And during this time, as they hired consultants, and this is something that the Nishimuras have told us, their consultants have said, you've got to bring that imaginal stuff into your company. And so we've kind of opened the door. We're in a larger plan, if you wish, but they had to transition new leadership. And bringing this new method in during that transition time was a little bit much to ask at that time. But they've come to Calgary. I'm talking to the third generation. We're working. They've indicated we want you back and to continue the work that we started with them. Does that help, Jordash? All right. Anyways.
Well, I want to encourage everyone to be able to Google Imaginal Education. You can read the website. You can look at videos.
You go to
Masters Academy, Calgary, and read the website there and look at some of the videos if you're wanting more information. But I assure you, you're going to thoroughly enjoy next week as we get into Imaginal Education specifically. So, Tom, I want to thank you for the time. It was so good. Really appreciate you taking the time to be able to invest here. And we look forward to seeing you next week.
All right. Thank you.
And everyone else, thank you for coming. Invite your friends, and we'll see you next week.